Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nishay from NishaySnow.com. Welcome. You can find the show notes for this page over at NACHESNOW.com/70. All right, Amelia dropped several amazing links, so you're going to want to head on over there after the show and grab all of them. Thanks again for joining me in the studio. And of course, as you guys know, this podcast is all about me interviewing everyday women doing extraordinary things, hopefully bringing inspiration to your ears. All right, so before I get into Amelia Roberts' story, just a couple of housekeeping things. If you haven't already, please subscribe and rate the podcast. It really, really helps. If you take 2 seconds right now to do that, I'd be forever grateful. And also, if you like this episode, please share it with friends and family. And then please head on over to NishaySnow.com and check out my journal, The Life Cleanse. It has you look at 10 areas of your life and really think about it and write down those answers and create goals to achieve for yourself. And I've made it using the best paper possible. I wanted it to be a keepsake. So when you open it up 2 years from now, it still looks as beautiful as ever, but it's like a good keepsake journal so you can look at what state of mind you are in right now. So head on over there. You can use the code FREESHIP if you purchase it from my website, but it is also available over at Amazon and Barnes & Noble if you prefer those vendors. All right, so excuse my voice on the intro and outro. As you guys know, it's like October 2018, and the weather has dropped like significantly. Like it was like 90, I think, 2 weeks ago. And now when you wake up in the morning, it's like 37 degrees. And maybe during the day it gets up to 60, which I don't mind too much, but it's just such a shift. I think my body is in shock a bit. But Amelia, I connected with Amelia because I interviewed actually her cousin, Danny, in episode 48. That was D. Finney Photography for those of you guys who've listened to past episodes. And Amelia reached out to me and then we started chatting about business things. And then when I found out about her story, I was like, oh my goodness, I need to have you on the podcast. So know that we're going to cover 2 things. The first thing, we're going to find out how a nurse by trade decided to create a side hustle. And a little hint, she wanted to get out of $18,000 of debt, which she did. And then second, when she started her side hustle, her friends introduced her to something called like the supplier diversity world, which I wasn't very familiar with. But when she started talking about it, I'm like, people don't know about this. So just to give you a quick base, like a definition before we go into the episode, supplier diversity is proactive business programs which encourages the use of minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, LGBT-owned, and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses as suppliers. And I think there are some other categories that's in that too. But just think, there are these very large companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon and hotel chains and computer companies or whoever it might be, and they all contract out for different things. And so people like us, which it seems like out of reach, but creatives like us actually can take advantage of it because I believe there are some laws that require, especially companies of a certain size, to have X amount of diverse suppliers. And so you might be a painter and thinking like, well, what does that have to do with me? But think about it. Like we talk a little bit about this in the episode, but hotels need art, right? So why couldn't your art line the walls of a new hotel? Like, why couldn't you be their diverse supplier for that arena? So this, I think, will even if you're just starting out or doing things as a side hustle, like this will open your eyes on how maybe you can like take your business to the next level, not necessarily like to overextend yourself, but just to make a little bit of extra cash. And if you're a full-time business, this is really a way to maximize what you're doing if you fall into any of these classes. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Her story in general is really cool because it just goes to show like when you put your mind to doing anything, like for example getting out of debt, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And then when you could just up level what you're doing by simply tapping into this whole diverse supplier world, that's pretty cool. So have a listen and tell me what you think about this episode, either on the show notes or join the conversation on Instagram and Facebook, and let's kind of chat about how we can take advantage of this. All right, let's get to it. Hello, Amelia. Welcome to the Studio 78 podcast.
Hey there, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so folks, I probably already said this in the intro, but after like meeting Amelia for coffee and talking to her, I'm like, I need you on my podcast.
Yeah, I was like, wow, really? Because, you've interviewed so many amazing, amazing women. I was like, are you sure? And she's like, you were like, yeah, Chance. I'm like, you're sure? Show. So let's see what happens.
Right? Yeah. No, I mean, I learned so much in that short period of time. I was like, no, 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 I need to get you on here.
Wow. Okay. No pressure.
But no pressure at all. But before we get into what you're doing now, can you just tell the listeners just like a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm a registered nurse by trade, entrepreneur by passion, and I have been around entrepreneurs my entire life. My first introduction to entrepreneurship is when I was 14. There was a lady that I admired who looked like me, who had a very successful business, and I had a good friend. I have a good friend who, around that time, I think he was like around 17, we were like maybe 15, 16, 17. He said he was going to retire at age like 30, and he pretty much did. I mean, he's very super part-time and he's doing well. His name is Dante Lee. So that was an introduction. And then my uncle, he's a jazz musician, and at one point even supported his family doing that. And his daughter, my cousin, my baby cousin, Danny Finney, now has a photography business that she started 10 years ago. So it's been around. The idea of doing something different has always been there. But yeah, so that's part of my background. Let me stop there. Yeah.
So you're a registered nurse, so that's like amazing. You're probably already, I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but making like decent money, right? You have a good career. So what made you decide to start a side hustle, and what was that side hustle? If you could tell people a little bit about that.
Sure. So going into nursing or not or being in nursing, I was fed I don't want to say the lie, but I was fed the idea that in order to advance my career, I had to get more schooling. So I got more schooling, and I came into another round of student loans, and my husband had just finished reading Dave Ramsey, and around the time the student loans became due, he was like, "Yeah, we can hit these with 1,000 a month, and these will be out of the way in like 2 years." And I'm like, "Okay, wow." And yeah, so he had like this plan of like repaying and of coming up with like where we can find $1,000, and I was like, wow. And I just honestly at that point I just could not bring myself to work extra hours as a nurse. So I was just thinking about, well, what else can I do? Because, truth be told, I mean, he had an amazing plan, but I like getting my nails done and I like getting my hair done and I like doing, so I was like, okay, so what can I do to come up with an extra 500 to 1,000 a month? And so I was, thinking back on, my cousin, seeing what she was able to do with, growing her business from social media. And I have also had some other friends, I've left them out, who had a virtual assistant business, and they're now working with Facebook and Google. And I knew that offering services to people could be a thing. And so I just was started to think about, what is it that I like to do? What do people ask me about? And, healthcare folks, they don't have much of I noticed a lot of healthcare people didn't have much of a social media presence, and I saw a lot of outdated websites, and I was like, you know what, I could help them. I'm not an expert. I'm no Gary Vee. I'm no Seth Godin, but I do know a little bit more than they do. So that's what I started to do. I started teaching people a little bit about social media marketing and such in the healthcare space.
Some people are like, okay, like that, they might have that idea like, oh my God, okay, I see this opening. I see where, people might need help in this particular space. But I think sometimes what holds people back is like, okay, well, now how can I start to get business and charge for it? So how did you go from kind of like idea to like actually, making money and getting clients?
Sure. So in around 2012, okay, so my good friends, Will and Sydney Hart of Smart Simple Marketing, they had a course called How to Become a Virtual Assistant, I think. And they had this like online drip content, you paid a fee and you got a series of emails over the course of whatever. And this was like back in 2008, 2009. And they're really ahead of their time in so many ways. So around 2012, I took that course. I was a nurse, but I've always, like I said, been thinking about what else can I do. So when I came like in 2014 or 2015, a couple years later after taking that course, I started thinking about, okay, what could I do and how do I do it? I thought about the course, and namely, it was mindset. They just talked about how important it is to get rid of imposter syndrome, to get rid of the thought of, who am I to, charge for this, and um, and the key to getting rid of that sort of mindset is taking action and doing things and starting to teach. And so I started to listen for people who I could teach. And that's how I
Mm.
got my first client. I was listening to a podcast and I was listening to somebody, and she sounded nice. And I looked at her website and I looked at her social media and I was like, huh, she could use my help. I could serve her. And so you know, it's a long story, but I don't have like that brain, the part of your brain that says, who am I to reach out to somebody? I don't necessarily have that.
Right,
So I
right.
reached out to her and asked her for a call. I think she may have had like a free 15-minute consult thing, but I don't know. But I signed up and we were talking with one another and I, asked her about, what she has going on, and I was sincerely interested. I wasn't, really necessarily trying to pitch, that wasn't my one goal was I'm going to call her and I will pitch her. My idea is I'm going to call her and see if I can serve her. And so I was calling her, listening to see if I could serve her. And then she had an opening where it sounded like she'd be open to hearing about what it is that I did. And then I
Mm.
was telling her, what I was starting to do and how I was starting to help people or teach people, because I wasn't necessarily quote helping, but I was teaching people on this thing. And she said, yes, that sounds like a thing that I could, so that was my first client. And so first client, first testimonial, updated my LinkedIn profile to reflect that in the testimonial. Second client said, hey, I need help with my social media. That was my second client, a couple more testimonials. And then I was able to leverage those into, different larger contracts.
Mm. Wow. It is kind of like the brain and that fear that like holds people back. And because it's like a closed mouth doesn't get fed, right? So all you could do is like put yourself out there, and the worst people can say is no. And I feel like sometimes people just have that like that fear of rejection, right? When it's just
Yes,
like it's not going to hurt you. Like, okay, if they're not interested, there's a billion people out here. Like, it's
yes.
okay, right?
Yes, yes, and I will also say I had been listening to podcasts. I was listening to tons of different podcasts, Smart Passive Income,
Oh yeah.
Entrepreneur on Fire, Amy Porterfield, and just listening to them interview people who were, I mess his name up all the time, Brunson, oh gosh, Perfect Webinar, and I can't remember his big thing. Oh gosh. But in any case, the perfect webinar guy, we'll get his name later, but he started out offering potato gun launchers. That's what he did.
Mm.
And started selling people digital products related to how to make a potato gun launcher. And Amy Porterfield interviewed a lady who was a cat groomer. And I just started to look at, all the different things that people were okay charging for. And I was just realized that, what, it's all in my head. Literally it is. And yeah, that really helped. So yeah, listening to podcasts was definitely very helpful.
Wow. So you get like your first couple of clients and you're like, all right, they are paying me for this. This is great. Like, I found a way to, like, make that extra 500 to $1,000 a month. But how did you grow it from there? Like, as far as, figuring out how to put together contracts, then pitch more people to make sure that you could, like, consistently, make money throughout the year and it's just not like a one off.
Mhm. So going back to my friends, Will and Sydney Craig Hart, Smart Simple Marketing. Early on, well, not early on. So I think like I don't know the year. Maybe it was like 2012. They started learning about themselves. I think Sydney went to an event, a supplier diversity event. She just happened upon the event, and she got in contact with somebody in the supplier diversity department of Oracle, and they said that there was a contract that they had that might be their size. They applied for it, they didn't get it, but they continued the relationship. So the idea of working with larger companies came on my radar pretty early, just because I've seen it done, and they, started to share about how they did it and the whole procurement, world and supplier diversity world. So I started developing relationships with people. Yeah, I just started developing relationships with people. But along that way, I was definitely growing my own social media following, such that when somebody who had a relationship with the health department, they were approached to say, "Hey, could you be an influencer on this campaign?" They weren't able to, and they put me in contact with the subcontractor on this larger contract with the health department, and it said, "Hey, would Amelia, be interested in being an influencer on this campaign?" And so that was my first introduction to working with a larger contract. And so once I had that, when opportunity came up to work with an NGO, or opportunity came up to support a marketer who was actually working with an association, I felt more comfortable in saying, "Yes, I can help you with this because I've helped these others." Or I was also
Mm.
able to have the past experience and saying, "I've worked on this campaign. As a result, they've had this, increase in signups, and I was able to speak to the results that this other campaign had and success, and was able to leverage that for um, for other contracts."
Very cool. And then this might be like a good segue too, because when I met Amelia, up for coffee, or met up, excuse me, with Amelia for coffee, we started talking about kind of this whole world, right?
Hmm.
Of procurement and so forth. And I was like, I don't think people are familiar with this world at all, or how they can kind of plug their business into it. So, can you just tell people who might not understand what that is, or know, like, maybe how their business could, like, plug into this world, like what it's all about?
So, so first, let me just say I am not a procurement expert. I am not. I'm not. Even though I had like all this thing about imposter syndrome, I know my lane is like, you think about like hiking up Everest. If securing a contract, with a government agency is like Everest. I am the guy that will get you to the base of the mountain.
But
Like,
sometimes you just need to
yeah.
get to the
No, no, no.
base.
Yeah, sometimes, if that's what you need, I can get you to the base of Everest, but if you need someone to help you scale that, I have recommendations, and we can leave them in the show notes. But, I'm just laughing at myself. But yeah, to be clear, but no, yeah, so the procurement, and supplier diversity world was opened up to me again by my friends, Sydney Craig Hart, and, the fact is that, if Google or Facebook or Oracle, if they need staplers, they can't just go to Office Depot and just buy some staplers, right? Same thing like with the government. If Health and Human Services, they need staplers, they can't just go to Office Depot and buy staplers. There's a specific way that purchases have to be made, and there's a certain way that money flows, and there's a certain way that purchases are made. So large companies such as the Whole Foods, such as Walmart, they sort of operate like a city. They have to have, there are laws and stuff that they have to follow for procurement, and there's a certain amount of money that's set aside for small and diverse suppliers. And just like a government, or a local county city government, just like they have the needs that everyday people need. So do these larger companies. And
Mm,
so let me know. Yeah, so that's supplier diversity. Yeah.
mhm.
Well, not really, but that I can't say that's it in a nutshell, but tell me what question you have because I could just keep rambling.
No, I think that's a perfect just start, right? Like
Mm,
that there is like an understanding from everybody that's listening that all of these large companies, corporate government or whatever are obligated, right, to go out and, number one, and correct me if I'm wrong, make sure that they're, I guess how do you say it? Like looking at several different companies before they settle for one for staples or whatever it might be. And two, that a percentage of the companies that they contract for different things should be diverse too. Is that correct? Does
yes.
that make sense? Okay.
Yes, yes. And there's like so many layers of this, and I'm definitely not an expert, but like there are different, I guess, levels to this too, in a way. Like for me, working with the state health department, me as a solopreneur, I'm not large enough to support the health department, right? But I can support a subcontractor with a portion of their contract
Mm.
needs. Um, and that's the little lane that I've found to be helpful for myself and other similar sized businesses. It's like, I can't support, health and human services, but the larger agency, the larger digital agency that is supporting that contract, I can come in and help them with the influencer campaign portion that wants to maybe reach a viewership of folks who look like me. I can easier engage with these people in a way that larger agency can't or doesn't know how.
And then something else we talked about too. So, for example, like me, right? I'm not in maybe what would be considered a obvious space, like, health, right? Like a lot of listeners are creators, so they do art or some
Yes.
kind of handmade product, so they're probably like
Hmm.
listening to this right now and thinking, oh, this isn't for me. It's somebody who has an obvious connection to the corporate and business world. But
Hmm.
in our conversation you're like, no, that's not true. So can you maybe explain that a little bit to help people kind of get there and understand, like, no, 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 like you might be able to take advantage of these opportunities.
Absolutely. So say Health and Human Services, and I'm sorry, I'm saying in that lane. There are other agencies out there. But yeah, so Health and Human Services say that they have bought a new building and they need to have it designed, right? They
Hmm.
need to bring in a designer. They don't necessarily keep an interior designer on staff. They don't do
Right.
that. They just have a project that it has a time frame that has a need. That would be a place that a creative could help. Say that designing firm that gets the contract, they are able to provide, you know, some type of expertise, but they might not necessarily have an expertise in oil paintings or something like that. Though that agency or that interior design agency then might look for someone else, to bring in something. And I'm sorry, my examples aren't that great, but that's not necessarily my lane. But you know what I'm saying? So like say like that agency has like a need to, completely, redesign a space, or they're moving, or they have a new space opening, or they just might want to have new pictures. Okay. So my husband, he works for an apartment complex and they have a capital spending budget. So like this apartment complex, under new management, all the old stuff is leaving, they're bringing new stuff in, somebody is purchasing the new stuff. When I say new stuff, I mean paintings and furniture and all that stuff. um, the old stuff is going out, the new stuff is coming in, and that new stuff, again, is they're working with a large budget that can't just go to Target and start picking out stuff, right?
Right.
So I guess the question some people might have is like, okay, this is nice, how can I get in on this? And the level, okay, so there's certain I don't want to keep saying there's certain levels with that, but it has to do with developing relationships with buyers, with decision makers, going to these events, just like my friend, Sydney Craig Hart did. She went to a supplier event. There are people there who are representing the Oracles and the Facebooks, and starting a conversation and starting a relationship and keeping that relationship going is critically important, such that when that person is planning for a new space and they're looking at, who could provide wall hangings or wall art, such that that person is thinking of you. And
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to developing relationships and being strategic about that, because that's another thing. It's like purchases that are under a certain dollar amount, and it varies, for like the local city government or local county or a corporation, their purchases under a certain dollar amount that you don't have to go through a whole bunch of hoops. You can just, and it would be a difference, and that dollar amount would make a difference for a small business owner. Like it might be purchases under $7,000 don't need to go through a whole bunch of red tape. It's pretty much can be a handshake or a simple contract, and then you provide the $7,000 worth of goods, services, or products to the folks, and they're happy. Again, I'm
Mm,
not an expert, but I just know that from my personal experience, like under a certain amount of money, like I didn't need to provide a capability statement to the state health department. I didn't need
mm,
to provide with the NGO. Yeah, I didn't need to give them a capability statement. They weren't looking at my business line of credit. They just wanted to know that I could do the thing. And I think they asked to look at a few testimonials, I think. Um, but it was because it was under a certain amount of money. And again, it's like I'm a solopreneur, you know, not that the contract was $7,000, but it was under that. But that would make a difference for me, right?
mm-hmm.
For a larger, agency, as a contract less than $7,000 won't make sense for them. So, there's definitely lots of places for individuality and flexibility, and it really does go back to developing relationships with people.
No, that makes sense. And for those of you guys out there, and correct me if I don't state this accurately, but Nicole Crowder upholstery is, I just interviewed, or she will be on this season, but she kind of does these beautiful upholstered chairs, right? So I'm thinking like someone like her could find a contract, and she potentially might, create, 20 chairs or whatever for $10,000, $15,000 to now outfit this, lobby or whatever in this new hotel in the DC area, right? Like that could be
Yes,
something she could get into.
exactly.
Or if and I don't know if this would count too, but let's say if somebody is like even like a jewelry designer and like, maybe a new museum like comes open, like does it even count like if they're looking for things to outfit like the store with, how like they try to
Yes,
get
yes,
local,
hmm,
artists and stuff like that, right? So do
yes.
all these things kind of fit into that bucket?
Yeah, it does. And yeah, it does. And one thing that I encourage, people to do, let me back up. So I'm taking the 1K 1 day class with Nicole Walters, and something that she always has encouraged small business owners to do is to think of themselves as, a corporation, right? That's what
Mm-hmm.
she preaches all day long. And in doing that, I invite small business owners to be aware that larger corporations, they have opportunity capture managers. It's a role. You can Google it, or search for opportunity capture manager on Indeed. Put in the zip code 20010 DC zip code, because they're all around this area. But in any case, there are folks whose job it is to look for opportunities. And
Mm.
some people might call that business development. You might call that sales development. You might call that relationship management. There's different words for it, but as a solopreneur or a small business owner, when you put aside certain time, in your day for business development, well, one, I recommend that you put certain time. I recommend that you put time aside for business development, but when you're in your business development role or activity for the day, consider, looking up buyers within your niche, within your locality. Consider looking up, yeah, buyers and purchasers, and procurement offices, and I invite them to look for supplier days of corporations that they admire, or just locally. um, And also, take a look at contractors. Like say they they go to a be curious. Say they go to a shop and they're at a museum. Ask them like, hey, do you know the people who have this product? How do they get in here? What's the process? Ask, and they'll it's easier to get I think it's easier to get information. It's more easier. That's not right. It's more easier to get information than we think it is. I think,
Mm-hmm.
I know, and that's how I've been able to have a lot of conversations with, decision makers by just asking, like who make like I know you probably don't know this, but who would know who makes this decision?
Mm-hmm.
And or not saying that, but along those lines, I know you probably don't know this, but I'm just curious. And just saying I'm just curious goes a long way. I'm just curious. Do you know who happens to make the decisions around this topic? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know? Do you know who would know? I'm just curious.
I think that's great because, some action steps, that you've already outlined to find out like, how to get connected is go to supplier events, look up, buyers, purchasers, procurement officers, right? Or maybe connect with relationship managers, or even like you were saying, like if there's like a store or a corporation that you would love to be connected to, just reach out to them and say like, how do I get my art in this building? Or I hear
Yes.
that you guys are building a new facility in X city. Are you looking for artists, and who do I contact for that?
Yes,
Right.
and you know what? And as I'm talking to you and listening to myself, I'm just realizing I'm making this so complicated, and that's a gift that I have. So, as a side note, I'm with the Maryland Black Chamber. I'm with the Maryland Black Chamber, and one of the reasons I'm with them is because they have a procurement arm. They just recently received funding to support their procurement programming, and I don't know when this will go live, but but I know next week. This is right now August 2018. Next week we have a supplier diversity event, and we are having several different. I'm so sorry. We have several different suppliers that are coming in, and people will be able to talk and start to develop relationships. But also, we have Dr. Zamora Olin, who has literally touched. I don't want to say the wrong dollar amount, but multiple millions of dollars in the government procurement arena. She's touched, and
Mm.
she's leading our procurement programming right now with the Maryland Black Chamber. So let's just keep it simple. Go to the Maryland Black Chamber, reach out to me, ask me about the Maryland Black Chamber procurement group and how you can get involved. Boom, easy
I'm
button.
Right. And then I guess
Yes,
and this will air like after that event, but then still I'm sure there's going to
each
be
event.
other events
Yes,
in the future. And then if you happen to not be in the DC area, like DC, Maryland, Virginia area, you could always look for groups like that within your particular city too,
yes,
right?
yes. And also, Dr. Zamora Olin, plug for her. If you're outside of DC area, she travels.
Right.
So, I mean, depending on everything, I can't speak for her, but I would
Right.
imagine she travels. I don't know, but no. Um, yeah, she's an amazing resource. So there.
Yeah. And then, so how have you used this? Because you said you started in 12. So you've been doing this for several years now.
Mhm.
And and I'm glad I have you on too, because you've chosen to also continue to do this as a side business, correct? Like you're
Yes.
still a registered nurse,
Mhm.
which is great because I think sometimes like it just so happens that I always end up interviewing people who are like, I quit my job. But I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm not saying you have to quit your job.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like great for them, right? But there's so many
Mhm.
people out there too that are balancing like a full-time job, but then also
Mm.
has an amazing
Wow.
business on the
Yeah.
side. So it's kind of cool to have you on there to tell that part of the story. Like, hey, no, 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 I'm still doing this kind of as a side hustle, but it's allowing you to have more financial freedom by doing that, right?
Yes, yes, and I do have to say, like, full transparency, I work 2 days a week as a nurse, and I take a ton of vacation. So, so these folks who are working a 9 to 5 every day, a full-time, 40+ hour work week, and they're doing a side hustle, respect to them. That's not my story. I don't wanna claim that I'm doing that because 'cause I'm
Okay.
not, and I'm not. I'm just not. No. No.
Now, so question around that. did you at some point, because of your new business, decide to cut down your hours, and then, how did you navigate that?
Um, no, 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 it's not a very interesting story, but no, I've always worked part time as a nurse. So yeah, so I went into nursing. How I got into it is long story short, but it's a long story, but I've never worked like 36 hours, 312 night shift, weekends, night. I've never done that as a nurse. I've always
Mm.
been in non-traditional roles. So no, yeah, no, I haven't done that. But with my side business, I started that in 2015, 2016, 2017, and in 2017 is when we made our last student loan payment. And so, yeah, at the end of 2017, we paid off our student loans successfully, yay! And then, yeah, 2018 is where we are now. Yeah.
Uh, no, thanks, for being very transparent with that, because I think it's important to know like how your life is structured, right? Like if it's part-time, if it's not part-time, so it could really allow people to know like, okay, she's able to spend a lot more hours doing her other business because she
Hmm.
is part-time. So no, that gives
Yes.
them a good
Yes.
sense of, of the
Yes.
reality. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, and but there are people who are, like I said, you know them, there's like tons
Right.
of people who are doing and they're doing amazingly well and they're really organized and it's they're yeah, amazing.
So within the last, so you said officially you started your business in
Tw
15, correct?
2016.
Or 16, excuse me.
Yes, yes.
So
Mhm.
officially you started your business in 2016. So since then, how have you used procurement to grow your business, and have you also used other ways to, bring exposure to your business to bring in more contracts?
So I believe in having more than one income stream. So so like my income is not like just based on contracts. I am an affiliate for all sorts of different things. And so that's like also part of where income is coming in. But as far as contracts, I believe in doing more, doing larger contracts with less people. Because I remember like in 2016, like I had like all of these, what are they called? W-9s with each and every thing, like over like a certain amount, you
Oh.
have to do a double W-9 or maybe something else. Might be
Mhm.
another tax form. But I just had like all these tax forms with, things that I did with all these different people. And then in 2018, I was like, you know what, I would just want to have like, I don't want to have like all of those to manage. So like right now, I'm just working with the NGO client and that's been fine. And, at the same time, I'm, definitely continuing to develop relationships and having conversations with people I might be able to serve, when that, contract is over.
Yes, and then for those who don't know what NGO stands for, that's just non-government organizations, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And no, that answers the question perfectly. And then just as we wrap up here, another, I think, scary thing to people. So we've talked, you've given them some great ideas on like how to maybe, get contracts or even work under like, another subcontractor. But that word contracts, period, scares the pants off of people.
Mm.
So how were you able to figure out like what your contracts look like? Like, do you have a lawyer? Like how were you able to figure all that out, and how do you kind of work it now?
When I first started, I paid for a lawyer to take a look over at, I'm trying to think what the first contract was for. Oh, it was for like a local women's association. There's like a local women's networking group. Their membership was like more money than I had. And I, talked to the organizer and said, hey, in exchange for, I can provide these services in exchange for waiving, not having to pay this. Would you be open to that? They said yes. They needed, more exposure. So that was my first contract. And then I just had someone take a look over, just to make sure I wasn't signing anything away. And she was like, yeah, it's fine. And so, yeah, so I did pay for a lawyer to take a look at that. But then after that one, I've worked with the other people that I've worked with, they've worked with contractors before, right? So it's
Hmm.
been more already, I didn't have to invent anything. But yeah, that was like the only time I sort of had to bring them something to sign, and I sort of
Okay.
used that template and tweaked it for like other things that have come up.
Okay. Because I think, yeah, sometimes it's like a big, scary thing for people, but I'm like, it's not that scary. You just need to
Yeah.
start, get a base. If you're uncomfortable, usually there's some lawyers in your area that are used to, especially, I feel like with the community listening here, like a lot of them are creative entrepreneurs, but there are a lot of
Mhm.
lawyers that are used to working with creative entrepreneurs that can help navigate them through that contract process too.
Yes, and shout out to SCORE. There that's a place to get plugged into. SCORE, SCORE. It stands for something. I'm not quite sure,
Yeah, I
but
forgot too.
they have they're experts, and it's very and a lot of it's free. And also the local women's business center, local to your city. Just Google local business, local or not local, women's business center. Local to you. They have help and support, and yeah, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can I can't
Right.
say I can't say definitively like, "Oh, don't worry about that." But bottom line is, as long as people understand why they're giving you money, as long as
Right.
everyone understands why money is being exchanged and for what and what the deliverables will be, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but it's not. Yeah, we have I have so many of us have a gift of overcomplicating stuff and putting
Right.
things outside of our reach. I'm like, "Oh, I could never do that because I don't know." And it's like, "No, that's not accurate." So,
Like
but
you
yeah.
could do this. Yeah. No, this has been great. This is good stuff. So, as we wrap up here too, any just parting advice before I go to the two wrap up questions for people who have heard you and they're just like, okay, this is amazing. I'd love, love, love to work with like some big companies in my area. Ooh, how do I start?
Goes back to relationship development and strategic networking. So, the first action item, I would say go to Eventbrite. Go to Eventbrite or meetup.com or probably Eventbrite, put in, or Google, let's make it simple, or any of those things, and just put in supplier diversity day or search supplier diversity events, no, near them, and see what they see. And make it a plan, make a commitment to attend, well, make a commitment to try to find an event local to them, and then make a commitment to attend to the event, and then make a commitment to keep in touch and follow up with the people that they meet at the event. Because that maybe could be a whole different conversation. But a lot of people tend to go to events, they make connection, they put business cards away, and then they never talk to anyone, and they are literally sincerely wondering why these people aren't thinking of them. And it's like
Right.
they're busy. It's your job to make people remind people that you exist. That's what your job is as a business owner. You need to remind people, you need to let people know that you exist to solve problems. And how throughout your day, as a business owner during your marketing time, what are you doing to making people aware that you're there to solve their problems? What are you doing? And, how are you communicating with them? Are you sending them an email that says, "Hey, it was nice meeting you at the event. Would you be open for a quick chat?" Are you connecting with them on LinkedIn? Are you connecting with them on Twitter? Are you keeping in touch with them in any way? So, I guess maybe that would be it. Look for the events and consider how you'll keep in touch with the people.
No, that is perfect because that is just like uh, an achievable step that anybody can do this week, right? Listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
So now I gold. Okay, so a couple wrap up questions.
Mhm.
The first one is how do you stay motivated?
Yes, motivation. So there is an amazing book that I recommend by my mentor called Mach 2 with Your Hair on Fire. And
Mm,
it talks about how we can create visions within ourselves. It's probably there's probably some scientific term to that, but taking time to vividly imagine my vision of my ideal version of personal success, what that means for me. Like, what am I doing? What am I wearing? What am I eating as I'm in this state of whatever? And so taking time to vision like my endpoint and in detail helps keep me motivated to keep doing actions that will bring me to that reality as I have it in my head.
mm. No, that's
But
good
but you
stuff.
yeah, with your hair on fire, it breaks it down like how to create vision, and so it's about self motivation because yeah, that's a different topic. But when we can create internal motivation, we get into falling in love with the process versus the result. Like we get in love with the process of following up with people versus the result of getting contracts. Um,
Mm.
so, but yeah. Hmm.
No, I'll add that to the show notes, and I have a webpage called The Bookshelf on theshadesnow.com. And I'll make sure to add it there too. Because I just looked it up on Amazon. It looks pretty cool. What is one thing you cannot live without?
Ooh, one thing that I can't live without. Oh boy, it would definitely have to be the Bible. It's so funny as I'm, learning about servant leadership and, these different, leadership models and, paying attention to the interests of other people, putting the interests of others ahead of your own and what do they need and how you can serve them. I'm like, wow, this sounds super familiar. So that would be the one thing that I can't live without.
Very cool. And then please like let the listeners know where to find you if you have like a website, your social media handles, like whatever you want them to know about.
Hmm. Yep. So I have two. I have my personal blog-ish could be found over at thebusinessofnursing.com. Um, but my client testimonials and such are over at solutionsbyamelia.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as at RN underscore solutions. And yeah, so maybe Twitter would be or Instagram, but yeah, at RN underscore solutions. Yes.
Well, Amelia, this has been a pleasure. Thank you
Yes,
for coming
yes.
on to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope something was helpful and I hope something was actionable. And that's my one desire is I really hope someone hears this and decides to take an action. If it's not just reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, what action should I take?" I would be happy to give them an action step to take. So just tweet at me, at RN underscore solutions, and I'm happy to give an action step.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I just want to mention two things. One thing we talked about after I stopped recording was something that was huge for Amelia was one-on-one coaching. And so she wanted me to let you guys know that has been invaluable for her. So think about investing in that. And the second thing I want to mention is something she says at the end of the episode, which is your job is to remind people you exist. You exist to solve problems. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us because if no one knows we're out there, then how are we going to sell our products or services? And all of our products and services should solve a problem, and we should understand what problem it's solving. So just kind of keep that in mind and make sure that you take the action steps that she talked about too, which is go to Google Eventbrite Meetup and just search supplier diversity events, find an event in your area, and make a commitment to go to one. So I challenge you guys, make a commitment to go to one in your kind of wheelhouse this year and let me know how it goes. Let me know if you end up making a connection. I would love to highlight your story. All right. So that's a wrap, people. Please rate the podcast and subscribe. And also, please share this episode if you've found it to be valuable. And I will be back next week, of course, with another amazing guest. Have an amazing week and catch me over at Instagram or Facebook at Nisha Snow. Take care. Bye.